Hi everyone, welcome to the Juris Doctor and Postgraduate Law Careers video series presented by the UNSW Law Society. Before we begin, I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people watching this video. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and recognize and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. I am Joanna, and I'm joined here today with my colleague Kate, today to bring you a video about careers in private law. We are pleased to welcome Chris Pierce, a distinguished lecturer and PhD candidate in the law faculty of UNSW. Thank you for joining us, Chris, and Kate will be asking you some questions now.
Hi, Chris. So we'll just start off quite easy. Could you briefly tell us what your current job is and what led you to it?
You're starting off easier, so there's a grilling coming in the future. First off, thank you very much for having me. I'm really happy to participate. I think this is a really great initiative. What do I do now? I'm a lecturer here at UNSW in the School of Private and Commercial Law. Some people watching this may have been taught by me, or depending on what subjects you've done, you might have listened to me. I teach principles of private law, contracts, and equity and trusts. And how did I get to this job? Well, it was a bit of an indirect path, really. I wasn't someone who completed their university studies and then had their heart set on academia. That was not actually my goal at all. When I finished my degree, a lecturer of mine had contacted me and she said, "Oh, would you be interested in teaching real property or what's called land law at UNSW?" And I was a bit terrified and I said, "Oh, well, you know, why not? Let's see what could go wrong." You know, I guess a lot could have gone wrong, but it didn't. And yeah, I just kept teaching casually on the side while I had other jobs. I worked in law firms. I worked as, you know, paralegals, clerks, all the rest of it. I worked in government. I worked as a legal editor, and I just kept teaching on the side as a part-time gig. And then eventually the opportunity came up to start working full-time in academia. And again, it still wasn't, I still hadn't quite reached the point of thinking, well, that will be my career. I just thought, okay, fine, why not again? So I started that. And then, you know, very quickly it became clear to me that that was what I did actually want to do as a career. And that's what I was passionate about. So it was a really indirect path, and it took a pretty long time, relatively speaking. I started teaching as a casual back in 2012, I think, or 13, somewhere around there.
You don't look that old.
Thanks. This is why you wear sunscreen and moisturize, people. But, you know, it took a while to get here. So really I'm, you know, early in my career, so to speak. But yeah, it was a very indirect path.
Yeah, amazing. It sounds like you have a lot of knowledge about a lot of different private law career options, which is really valuable for all of us as well. So I think just to start off with, what does an average day look like in your current position as a lecturer?
So we're in the midst of the term still. So what it looks like for me at the moment is that on the days when I'm teaching, for example, it's get up early, very early, remind myself what it is that I am teaching, because it's obviously at the forefront of your minds when you're doing your readings and listening to your recordings, but I have to bounce between teaching and other responsibilities in my job. So I just have to remind myself where we're up to, make sure that I'm prepared, because I think my students are coming to class having done the work themselves. It's only right that I'm in the position to meet them prepared as well. So I'm a firm believer that there's nothing better than preparation. There's no substitute. So my day when I'm teaching will start with me doing the exact readings you've done, even though I've done them a dozen times before, doing them again so that I'm mindful of the sorts of questions I might get asked. Then it's to dash off to class. That's the next thing. Be as lively and as engaging as I can possibly be. Make these topics, these subjects, which I know lots of students are terrified to study, trying to make them as interesting as possible. And then between classes, I'm responding to emails. I'm trying to find time to advanced research that I'm working on. I'm going to faculty committees or university committees. I'm doing other things that I'm involved in outside of UNSW, but connected to tertiary education. So yeah, balancing a lot of plates in the air. When the teaching term ends though, so once marking's all wrapped up, an academic career is a little bit different to what it's like when the teaching term is on foot. So when academics aren't teaching, they're primarily working on their research agenda, whatever that may ensue. So for me, it would be, for example, returning to work on academic papers that I was in the midst of writing before the term began, or presenting at conferences perhaps, or collaborating with others and starting or commencing a new research project. So it's really night and day when it comes to the career during the terms versus the career outside of them. It's almost like two different jobs. It's a very stark difference.
Yeah, that's perfect. Do you find that you prefer more of the teaching aspect of academia or more of the research side?
I enjoy both. In terms of which one I enjoy more, well, certainly the teaching. I think being in a classroom is a really energizing experience. And I think all of us on some level enjoy being center of attention, right? And when you're in the classroom, I guess it feeds that ego. But no, that aside, I genuinely really love being in the class because I think it's a real privilege to have so many, really engaged, really bright students who, even if they maybe didn't necessarily want to be in an equity and trust class, for example, once they're there, I think they give it their all, and it becomes a really lively and a really engaging environment. And so for me, even though obviously there's a lot of work involved in teaching a class, once you're there, it all pays off immediately. The moment you get to have those discussions, when you get to see the expressions on the students' faces. And I think that for me, the thing I always find most rewarding is when I can see the light bulb turn on. There's always that thing, whatever it is, some concept, maybe it's a hard case or whatever it might be. There's always something that each student has really struggled with when they've been preparing for class. And I think when you see those individual moments where things click for people, that's really satisfying. Because I remember as a student, I would do the work before class, but be, really stressed, or I'd be focusing on little details that I just didn't understand, or that I thought were, much more important than what they really were, or much harder than what they were. And oftentimes I would leave class feeling like, oh, I'm still unclear about that. I'm still anxious about it. So for me, the big goal is making sure that students don't leave class the way that I used to leave class. And so, yeah, when you're in the classroom and you get to see that, it's really gratifying. But it's not about me, it's about you guys. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, the goal is that I want students to enjoy the course, because I think it goes without saying that when you enjoy something and you feel a love for it, the motivation to do the work naturally follows. I think if you're hating a course, if you find it intolerable, then having to go and do the readings and do the preparation just becomes infinitely harder because it's procrastination, right? You just go, oh, I know I have to do it, but I'll do it at the absolute last minute. So I can't win over everyone. I know it's not always going to be everyone's cup of tea, but hopefully, even for people who don't particularly have an interest in the subjects, hopefully it makes it more enjoyable for them and then helps them be motivated to, get through the course and want to get through the course, not just tolerate it, hopefully enjoy it a little bit.
I've had you as one of my tutors at various points, and I can definitely say that our class has always enjoyed having you. What has been, I guess, the most unexpected challenge that you faced when you first started your legal career?
I think it's something I hear a lot from students, and I certainly experienced it too. I think this idea of imposter syndrome, I think it's not shocking that there are a lot of really talented, really intelligent young men and women out there entering the legal profession every other day. And it's really quite challenging to accept that you can be good yourself and others can also be good, or, you know, excellent, as the case may be. And I think it's really important that when people start commencing their legal careers, they just retain a bit of perspective and recognize that it's possible for you to be excellent and others to be excellent too. And it's not a competition, and you don't have to be constantly comparing yourself to other people, which I know is very hard, and we all do it, even if we tell ourselves not to. But I think being able to just embrace the fact that we've all got strengths, we've all got particular skill sets, and you can't become someone else. All you can be is the best version of yourself. And so when you go into these environments, whether it be a big law firm, whether it be the public sector, whatever it is you choose to pursue, I think you have to constantly just be your biggest fan and remind yourself that, yes, there are people out there who are also very accomplished and very capable, but I'm not in a fight to the death with them. I just need to do the best that I can do. And what then happens is that that will always get recognized in some way or some form. And you don't have to be better than someone else to get recognized. You just have to be effective at your job, whatever it is you choose to do. And I think once you can get past that, I think once you can stop constantly feeling a need to compare your performance to others, or worry that you're not as good as this person, or whatever it might be, once you can just embrace the fact that you're doing something you're good at and you are putting in the best effort you can and you're doing the best work you can, I think any professional career becomes a lot easier. Every career has challenges, but you don't need to be the source of one of those challenges. You should be making your own life a bit easier.
Yeah, that's perfect advice. And it kind of, I guess, leads on to my next question, which is, you know, obviously a lot of law students feel very nervous about beginning their legal career because there's so many different pathways. So how important is securing a clerkship, volunteering, or other extracurricular activities for students in securing a job in private law?
Well, I didn't get a clerkship. I didn't apply for one. So you can treat that however you like in terms of whether you think I managed to succeed despite not having a clerkship, or whether you view my career as a failure, I suppose. Draw your own causation between the two. Leaving that to the side, how important is it? Well, I guess it's a measure of what you really want. If your goal, and it's a legitimate goal, if your goal is to go into a big commercial law firm and that's what you want to do, not what you think you should do, but what you want to do, then getting a clerkship is probably going to be highly important to you. And it should be, because it's a step along the way to getting to what you want to get to. I suppose, though, if that's not really what drives you, and it certainly didn't drive me, I had no desire to work in a big corporate law firm. And I'm not criticizing people who do. It's just we're all different. We've all got different passions. That wasn't something I wanted to pursue. So a clerkship had negligible value to me. So I wasn't going to put myself through that process and experience the disappointment, or, who knows what would have happened. But I wasn't going to put myself through that because I didn't want the end goal. It just wasn't for me. So I think in terms of how you engage outside of your studies while you're a student in terms of preparation for the workforce, I think you just need to constantly be asking yourself, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Not obsess over it, obviously, that's unhealthy, but, I think just center yourself and say, well, what am I actually passionate about? What do I want to be doing? We can say 40 hours a week, but honestly, probably like 70. So what do you want to be doing with all those hours? Do you want to be working in a corporate law firm? And maybe you do, in which case, well, clerkships are right up your alley and you should be pursuing that, and you can, you may succeed, you may not. It's not necessarily about how much you want it, because lots of people want those jobs. But that's something for you to then pursue. If your goal instead is perhaps social justice, or, human rights law, or maybe you want to work pro bono or something like that, then a clerkship is really just not a good fit. It's not going to give you those opportunities. So you should be thinking wider and broadening the scope of what kind of opportunities you want to pursue. And I think also what's important to remember is that not everything has to lead to a job for it to be valuable. You can do these, for example, a social justice role or volunteering or something like that, just for the sake of doing it. And the benefits to you could very well be that, you know, a job offer stems from it eventually, but it could also just be the fact that it enriches your knowledge of the law and it gives you skills you didn't previously have. I always encourage students, for example, to go do the law review, as in not the singing and dancing, but the editing, to join the law journal and be an editor, because I think for me, doing that when I was a student gave me skills that I still use every single day. You know, I'm as anal retentive as they come, and going through that editing role has been necessary for me because academic work requires you to be really self-critical, and you have to go over your work with a fine-tooth comb. And, you know, it gave me skills like reading things really closely, you know, and that didn't get me a job, not that I know of. They didn't offer me a paid role at the conclusion of it, but it was beneficial. It gave me skills that I still use every day. And it was something I enjoyed. It was something I was passionate about. So I guess there's two questions then, is where do you want to be? What are you passionate about doing with your future? And then that might help you determine the sorts of extracurricular or workplace opportunities you want to pursue now when you're a student. But I suppose the other thing is, well, what is any opportunity going to give you, just in a broader sense? You know, what would you derive from it, and what skills might you develop? Would it make you happy? Because, you know, sometimes just being happy is actually a really great benefit, and it doesn't necessarily have to produce any kind of result. So I think these things all depend on the individual. Some of them are going to be really important to what you want, and they're going to be really important to you on a personal level because they fulfill you in some way. And some of these things just won't do it for you. And that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, or that you're a bad student, or no one's going to hire you or whatever. It just means we've all got different tastes and different palettes, and we just need to cater for what we want, as opposed to pursuing things that we think others want us to do.
I think it's perfect, because so many people get stuck thinking that corporate law, commercial law is the only option. And, you know, as amazing as those opportunities can be, you know, it's not everything if that's not the direction that you want to take. So actually on that, do you have any advice for students who are interested in getting into academia? So, you know, if that's the kind of path they want to take, what should they be looking at doing?
So I think if that's something you want to pursue, well, there's a few ways you can go about it. You can follow my path, which is about the least direct way to get there. But for example, some people start by teaching casually in a course. That can be one way of entering academia, but it's far less common. The far more common way is that someone will go and start a postgraduate research degree. So that could be doing a PhD. That's the main way most people start in academia. But there's other things you can do. You can do master's degrees, which are just research-based, and you can use that as your stepping stone. But that's usually the common way, is that you start working in that university environment via your PhD studies, and that's what then ultimately leads to you getting a permanent academic role.
Perfect. That's brilliant advice. So how easy is it for students who maybe want to do the masters, or they want to do a PhD and do some academia, but then want to do commercial law in the future? What's the options available there?
There are quite a lot of academics who have gone from, or former academics, I should say, who started in academia and then went to private practice and either became barristers or went and worked in commercial law firms, for example. There was a professor at Sydney Uni, for example. She was a professor of administrative law in her, I think, I don't want to guess her age at the time, but she was, I think, somewhere in her late 50s, decided she wanted to become a barrister, and she's now a senior counsel. There are academics, there's an academic now in the UK who is now on the Supreme Court in the UK. So it's certainly not, I guess, to be perceived as ditching the possibility of going into practice. There are lots of academics who act as consultants for law firms, who get briefed by barristers or counsel to give advice on matters. You know, that's part and parcel of developing expertise in a particular area of law, is that expertise is not, I know people tend to think, oh, it's just academic, in the sense that you don't really know the real law. But the reality is, if you're keeping up to date on all of these developments and you have this knowledge, that is valuable, because there are people who don't have that knowledge, and for them to acquire it would be a huge drain on resources. They just don't have the capacity. And so academics then are very valuable in terms of filling in those knowledge gaps when disputes arise. So far from being, I suppose, delegated to some cave somewhere where private practice won't ever go near you, the reality is that lots of academics dabble in both and sometimes make a permanent transition from one to the other. So it's possible to go either way. Similarly, there's people who started in private practice, they might have gotten very senior and been a partner in a firm or something like that, and then subsequently go to academia. So it cuts both ways.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, well, some of the tutors, at least at UNSW, also are teaching while they're working as well. So you mentioned before that you worked for government, you clerked and you did some other non-teaching jobs. So can you tell us a little bit more about like your previous work experience, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you found was, beneficial?
So when I was a student, I worked as a paralegal in a immigration law firm. Which I can't say immigration law was my cup of tea, but in terms of what I learned from it, I think being a paralegal in any firm, irrespective of what they specialize in, gives you a necessary exposure to how the legal world works. So working with solicitors and going to court, for example, reading through files, meeting with clients, all those sorts of things, it gives you that real world experience of what it is to be a lawyer. And, you can watch as many TV shows or movies as you like, but it's very different to the real thing. And so I think that kind of exposure when you're studying is really valuable. So I did that when I was a student. When I finished, I then went and did my PLT, the experience working in a criminal defence firm, which apples and oranges from immigration law. And because it was a really small firm, I was going to court every single day. So for 18 months or whatever it is, I was in court day after day after day, which, was what was interesting to me. The kind of work that a solicitor does at the office in terms of preparation for court was not interesting to me. That was not something I wanted to do, but I've always found advocacy really exciting and really interesting. I did a lot of mooting as a student. I loved it. And that for me then meant if I had a job where I was in court every day, that was really exciting. I've always got in the back of my mind the possibility of maybe becoming a barrister one day, because I would really love to do that. Flowing from what you asked before. But I didn't stay with that job, not because of what the tasks involved, but just because criminal law is quite it can be quite depressing in a real sense, quite traumatic, and it takes a toll on you. I think you've really got to be quite a really, really hardened person to be exposed to that day after day after day and not have any kind of lingering effects from it. And I think once I recognized that it was becoming a bit much, some of the things I was seeing, hearing, I just realized it was time to step away. I just couldn't do that anymore. So I went from that, and then I worked at the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, or what was then the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. I think it's got a different name now, I can't remember. Don't teach admin. And I worked there in the equivalent of like a judge's associate. So I worked for all the different tribunal members, some of whom were federal court judges. So I'd be in, again, it involved going to hearings every single day. So that was something I liked. So they had quite a diverse subject matter of jurisdiction. So social security, tax, it doesn't sound very diverse because I can't remember them. Oh, aviation law, of all things. National security matters would sometimes come to the tribunal as well. So yeah, it gave me exposure to lots of different things, lots of different kinds of work, lots of different research tasks, all of that. And I worked for quite some time as a legal editor. So I worked at Thomson Reuters. When you go on Westlaw and you are trying to find cases on a particular legal issue, and you go through and you say, oh, what's it about? Oh, it's about property law. Which bit of property law? Oh, it's about an easement. Which bit? And all the cases are categorized under particular headings. Well, I used to do that. So I used to read cases, identify the exact issue, and then we had this almanac, so to speak, with about 10,000 different pinpoints where you could place the case as to what its precise issue was, and then you would classify it. So then when people go looking up that particular thing, they find all the cases on that question of law. So I would do that. I'd write head notes. I'd write discussions on the cases, all that sort of stuff. And in terms of your question before about, well, how did some of these jobs benefit you? Well, I guess there can't be any better skill in terms of legal analysis and legal thinking than to actually just read lots of cases. I know some students hate the idea of having to sit down and read a case, but the reality is it's the only way that you'll actually become a really apt legal thinker, because you need to be able to pick apart what the court's saying. And that job meant that I got to the point where I could pick up probably any case now on any topic, regardless of whether it's something I teach or not, or whether it's something I research or not. And I'd be able to pinpoint exactly what the issue is, because it's a skill I developed reading, 24 cases a day, day after day for, years. And so, yeah, I may not do the job anymore, but the skills have been hugely beneficial. I can read a case and in the drop of a hat be able to work out exactly what the issues are and navigate my way through it with ease. And that's something I just couldn't do as a student, not without really, pulling teeth and really having to work at it. And now it's just second nature. So yeah, I bounced around quite a bit. None seems to be a logical flow from the last, but ended up at the right destination, I suppose, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable for students to know. And I'm sure everyone is jealous of your ability to read cases that quickly. Last question, we only have a couple minutes left. Mm-hmm. Is there any general advice you would like to share with current students who are interested in pursuing a career in private law?
I guess what I would say is don't be discouraged. These are careers that lots of people want to pursue. And I think what we need to bear in mind is, as I said before, you're all highly talented young individuals. A job will find its way to you. So I guess you can't expect that everything will work out perfectly the very first time you apply for a job. Maybe it will, and maybe it does for some people, but for most it doesn't. And I guess it's important not to take that as a valuation of you and your worth, and to not get discouraged. If that's your goal, if that's what you want to do, then keep knocking on the door and eventually someone will open it for you. All things that are worthwhile don't come without a bit of struggle and a bit of hard work. And you're doing the hard work and doing your studies. That's obviously a huge component of it. If what you want is a particular career or a particular job, well, that's a different kind of challenge, and you have to work at that too. I think a lot of students, I should say, come into university thinking that a job is guaranteed at the end, and they expect that walking out into the world and having a law degree is going to be rolling out the red carpet. And the reality is it isn't. No degree does that, or very few degrees do that. At the end of the day, getting the degree is part of the work that needs to be done, but then you have to do the hustle. You have to identify the opportunities you want to pursue, and you have to pursue them, and you have to convince people to give you an opportunity. And that happens through that clerkship process. It's all about convincing people that they should give you that opportunity. But that same approach applies to any job you want to pursue. You've got to always convince people that you are the best candidate. And if that's what you want to do, then you just have to keep assuring yourself that you're on the right path. And it will happen. It may not happen in the first job you apply for or the first 100 you apply for, but it will happen. I've got friends who I went to uni with who had particular career goals in mind, whatever that may be. And so, for example, one who really desperately wanted a clerkship and didn't get one. And then 10 years later, he ended up getting a job at one of those top tier firms. So it happened, but he had to really keep reminding himself to keep going for it and keep that opportunity in his mind. I'm not suggesting to people watching this that it might take them 10 years to get their dream job. My point is that don't get discouraged just because it doesn't happen immediately or magically. And don't feel bad if it does happen instantly for other people. You know, luck in life comes in ebbs and flows, and it may not be your moment to be lucky, but at some point in life, you'll get it paid back in spades. It'll be your lucky moment. So don't treat everything as a remark on you and your worth or your value. Just keep plugging along, keep pursuing the sorts of jobs you would like to have, and eventually it will come together.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. I think that's really great advice, especially because I know a lot of people are approaching graduation and a lot of people are starting their clerkships as well. So I think that's all we have time for. But thank you so much for taking the time to answer all of the questions that we have relating to careers in private law. And I'm sure students will absolutely love the advice that you've given and feel really reassured. So thank you for joining us, and make sure for the people who are watching to keep an eye out on for videos on careers in public and criminal law as well, because they will be coming out soon. So thank you so much again, Chris.
Thank you, Chris, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.